Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to look at Kommandos. We're going to take a deep dive and we're going to structure this one a little bit differently than we have in the past. So if you like it, make sure you let me know in the comments because I'm going to be trying some new things moving forward. Every few months or so I start kind of like trying different things and doing different things with my videos. And generally speaking, they've gotten positive feedback. So again, if you like what you're seeing, make sure you let me know. Thanks. One of the big changes is instead of just reading slides to you while you look at slides, and yes, I did get a haircut, uh, you're going to look at my handsome face while we talk. We're going to follow the same format we've been following for the last few deep dive videos. We're going to look at the data sheet. We're going to talk about preferred loadouts, and we're going to talk about thoughts on usage, and if and how I think we could fix it, and what I would rate it overall. Obviously, all the Ork units we've been rating with TIF, and we're going to continue that rating system. First of all, here's their normal stat line. You're looking at Kommandos. They move 6 inches, T5, 5 up save, 1 wound, leadership 7, OC 1, and then the knob obviously has 2 wounds. That has been a core staple for Orks for a long time, I think, just since I didn't play 7th. I assume it's just been since 8th. I stopped playing in 4th, hopped over to Fantasy, and pretty much everything had 1 wound in 4th. So now we're going to take a look at their war gear. Here's the ranged weapons options. This is pretty much exclusive to the boys. The knob can take a different melee weapon, but we'll dig into that in a minute. You can take 1 Burna. It is strength 4, 0 AP. It's a flamer. You can take up to 2 special commando shooters. They're rapid fire 2. You can take a rocket launcher, and then everybody gets a slugger. It's just a pistol. And then melee weapons. The knob can take a big chopper. You can take up to 1 breacher ram, and then you can take one choppers on everybody, and then close combat weapon for the guys who take guns. So like your burners and your rocket launchers would get close combat weapons, and then the power claw is the other option for the knob. Like I said, the knob gets a big chopper or a power claw. Up to 2 commandos can have their slug and chopper replaced with 1 special commando shooter. You can also take 1 breacher ram, 1 burner, and then 1 rocket launcher. And then you also can take 1 bomb squig and or 1 distraction grot. We're going to take a look at their abilities now. They have infiltrators and stealth. Infiltrators is the forward deploy. You do have to be 9 inches away from enemy models and enemy deployment zones. Sneaky surprise, enemy units cannot fire Overwatch on them. So I love that. We'll dig into it in a little bit here, but it is one of the reasons I just started running them a lot. The distraction grot once per battle gives you a 5 up invulnerable save for a shooting phase. And then the bomb squig once per game after you make a normal move on a 2 up, you do a D3 mortal wounds to an enemy unit within 12 inches. Note that this is not a shooting attack. It does not need line of sight. You just have to be within 12. There is no targeting restrictions on it other than you have to have completed a normal move. That being said, that does mean you could just move and then you can bomb squig something in engagement range. There's nothing that says you can't. And then the unit composition is 1 boss knob and 9 commandos, and everything standard loadout is slugga and choppa. Preferred loadouts, as always, I just think the knob gets the power claw, the big choppa just underwhelms, and I honestly didn't even look to see if he was equipped with a base choppa, because if he is, I just assume it's like every other base choppa where it's just 3 attacks. Like they did not fix that aspect of the data sheet. Really, there's no reason to not take the bomb squig or the distraction grot because the models are superfluous. You don't even have to put them on the table. They're kind of like the Tau drones now, where they're just markers. The special commando shooter, I don't think is worth the points. If it had assault, I think taking 1 would be a great move. Commandos do have the grenades keyword, so I think that would be an excellent move if it had assault, but it doesn't. So you're just kind of wasting dice when you could just have choppas, which are just better. I think the burn is a good choice because it does let you circumvent the ballistic skill 5. And, you get some auto hits. It's only a D6, but it does help in clearing out things like termagants, hormagants, and, witches, guardians, things of that nature. Low toughness bodies with a bad save. The ram to me is an auto take. You only get 2 attacks with it, but it is effectively like having 2 more power claw attacks. So with the knob and the ram, if you can get them both stuck into the same target, you're going to get 5 power claw attacks, or you're going to get 7 power claw attacks effectively when you're on the WA. The rocket, I just think, is garbage. I've not been very subtle about that. Strength 9, neg 2, 3 damage for what was historically our flagship anti-tank weapon is kind of like sisters having multi-meltas. It's just not good. Especially because it's D3 shots and blast. If they were maybe flat 2 shots and lost blast, I could make an argument or a justification for it. But that's not the world we live in, so I would just leave the rockets at home. Obviously, I'm talking from a worth their points perspective. I'm not talking from a flavorful or lore-based perspective. So if you like running them, run them. But I'm telling you, like, I'm going to put this on the table and take it to a tournament, it's just not worth it. You could throw a D3 rocket shots, or you could just have choppas, and the choppas are just going to be a little bit better. Again, no assault, leave it at home. I do think the abilities that they have are fantastic. Infiltrator lets you position them to score very early. Stealth does wonders for their survivability. There's a few armies out there where stealth doesn't matter. Certain Tau units, probably some Votan units, and I'm sure there's others that can ignore hit roll mods and stuff like that. I'm sure Marines have a couple things that can, and etc. But overall, it does help a lot. They're T5, they're 1 wound. And honestly, I've noticed in the current edition that Ork Boys being T5 has helped way more than it did in 9th. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that melee's been toned down so much that I just don't feel like I'm picking them up in melee. Like, I still pick them up in shooting, but having that T5 in melee has been a lot more relevant. For better or worse, I would rather the melee phase be a bit more killy than it is. But again, this is the world we live in. I absolutely love the fact that you can't overwatch them. I hate Overwatch as a mechanic. It is arguably like the part of 10th that's pushed me away from playing as much as I used to. I don't like picking up units in my own turn. And again, I understand it's just a part of the game. I'm just telling you how I feel on it. I loathe that mechanic. So anything that tells you you don't get to do it to me, I will just inherently take. But it does allow them full access to the table, so it's one of those where you don't have to worry about, oh, I can't do this, or oh, I can't do that. You get to take your moves with them, which I absolutely like. You don't have to worry about hitting the middle of the table, getting overwatched off the board while you're trying to deploy some homers or something. I'm not going to talk too much on Snickrot. He's going to get his own video, but his ability to once per game teleport can be really handy. And, it is in the same turn. We'll talk about that again in a little bit, but it's an excellent ability. When I first started putting my orcs back on the table, which hasn't been for very long, I was getting burned out on the Drukhari, and I was like, you know what, let's get the orcs back out on the table for a little bit. Let's look at some other things. We've been playing some other games, stuff like that. But early on, I was kind of suiciding them, kind of playing them like I do my mandrakes. And that works for me for my mandrakes because of how I play, right? Like I just stack the line with a unit or 2 of mandrakes and just try to kind of pin you back for an extra turn. That's all I use them for. I don't score points with them. I just use them to kind of pin you back for a turn. But I found out with the Kommandos very quickly that that's not the greatest use for them because of the fact that they're not T3 and the fact that, they actually have like decent melee. Their shooting is kind of worthless, but they actually have decent melee. And the fact that 10 of them is the unit size, there's no 5-man. So because 10 of them is the unit size, it just feels like maybe using them as a suicide isn't the best use of them. You know, because if they die early, that's 135 points that's evaporating very early. And you can take cheaper units that'll do similar things. You can take some Storm Boys, take them in a 5-man, and you can torpedo them at something to try to like do some damage, tie it up for a turn. And what I found with Kommandos is they're much better off either positioning for only scoring or positioning for a counter charge or to like run up and tag something to kind of slow it down for a turn. And that's how I've started using them, is deploying them a little bit more conservatively. I've been running 2 units, and we're going to hop to a table so we can kind of look at what I mean. Okay, so if this is our deployment zone, we're looking at search and destroy. We know there's going to be an objective here. We know there's going to be an objective here and here. I guess it's actually in the footprint. It's somewhere in there. It's not important. A lot of times what I've been doing in this specific layout with this specific deployment zone, and this will actually work for this one, which is what, Crucible of Battle. And it'll really kind of work for that one as well, but not quite as well. But for Crucible and for Search and Destroy, what I've been doing is I've been putting just a brick of them here. And then a lot of times I put a brick of them here. And that might not get me, you know, out of my deployment zone per se, but it puts them in very easy access to that objective there. And it puts them in pretty easy access to that objective there. So that if, for whatever reason, I need to get an objective, I can easily tag it. I can advance them to get to the middle. I can advance them to get here. They have options. Depending on my opponent's army, I may kind of like line them up here. I think, you know, if it's not a very shooting army, which those are pretty rare, but it's one of those, like, if I can sneak a mob back here, I absolutely will. But it does depend on what I'm playing against. So largely they've been going right in this middle area and right up here. And that's what I mean by just deploying them a little more conservatively. Because historically what I've been doing is like I might put a brick in the middle, or I might put them like out here, you know, something where I could get cover, but I could kind of like get them, I could get cover, but I could get them towards my enemy's deployment zone. There were games where I put them in here, and this isn't terrible, but the problem is that if you play against any kind of like really mobile army, there's a good chance you're going to get shot off the table early. You know, what it does do, and you can't put them there and obviously search and destroy because you got to be 9 inches away from enemy deployment zones. But the middle of the board is actually fair game because of the 9-inch bubble. But again, it's one of those, after playing a few games and just picking up real quickly, because I was trying to play them like Kommandos, I learned that I just need to kind of change my approach. Overall, I think Kommandos really only have 1 to 2 big issues, and they're not even that large. I think they're maybe just a hair overpointed, given that they are almost strictly a utility unit. They don't do a ton of damage. They can if you get them into infantry and smaller things, but for the most part, they're there to score points. And at 13.5 points a model, you're really paying for the distraction grot and the bomb squig. I think it's well, I know it's 135 for 10. This is how we get to the 13.5 points. I do think they could be maybe 10 points for the unit cheaper, which drops them down to 12.5 points a model or 125 points. And honestly, I don't think it changes their feel a ton. But I do think that's a good sweet spot for them. And I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think they're crazy overpointed. But you figure 10 points is less than 10% of 135. So you're talking about a 7%, 8% points drop. And I think that kind of puts them right in the sweet spot where they need to be. And I know a lot of infiltrate units are kind of pointed a little high. And that's fair, you know, because you don't want them being too cheap and then they get spammed and it just drastically alters the way the game's played. The only other thing I could really complain about is that you can only take them in units of 10. You can't take in 10 to 20 or 5 to 20. It's only 10. And I think that's kind of weird. I would have to look and see if that's how the other kill team boxes are kind of set up. Because remember, the Kommandos are a kill team box. But I wouldn't mind seeing either a 5 to 10 or maybe a 10 to 20 or even like a 5 to 20. I don't know. Like I said, ultimately, it's a little weird. But that's not the end of the world. The 10 Kommandos, I've had good success with them once I kind of figured out how to not be an idiot. So that's one of those where I do think that's a kind of nitpicky. Other than that, the only real issue they have just stems from the weapons themselves. You know, orc shooting, they have access to a handful of guns, and they're just not worth the points that were factored into their free war gear cost. So there's no reason to take them. And then we're going to talk about characters and enhancements that pair well. Obviously, you can only put Snickrot in the unit. He is solid, but he's arguably just a touch expensive also. And like I said, we're going to dive into him in his own video. But what he does do is he gives the game or unit a once per game teleport. And that teleport happens completely in the orc player's turn. I believe they're picked up at the start of the movement, and then they're put down at the end of the movement, which can get pretty cheeky, and that's pretty rare. And what that does do is, and actually, let's double check that. I don't want to misspeak. So we're going to double check that. And I'm not going to edit my double checking out. We're going to do it together, friend. But I'm pretty sure it is. Once per battle in your movement phase. So it's not even at the start. It's just in your movement phase. So you could actually, here we go, Kommandos. Give them +2 to advances, +2 to charges. You could put them down with Snickrot and then have a 7-inch charge coming out of Deep Strike. So it's just one of those, like, it's got some play. I wouldn't be terrified of Kommandos. They're arguably no different than doing the same thing with a weird boy and some boys. So Art as Nails does help keep them on the table. It's a fantastic strat. I hope that kind of sticks with a lot of the orc detachments, because that -1 to wound is handy. And if there's only like Marines have Armor of Contempt, I hope that's kind of what Orcs Art as Nails becomes, is, you know, non-vehicles, -1 to wound. Every detachment, obviously minus the Dread Mob, gets it. I would not complain. Here we go. Early in the game can help them cover some ground. I just kind of talked about this. Not only could you pick them up and drop them, but if you deploy them aggressively and you get first turn, they can move their 6 and then they can charge and add 2 to the charges. So again, if you have to be 9 inches away and you're 9 inches away exactly from an enemy unit, you can get 3 inches away and then add 2 and make it an unfailable charge if you wanted to, or just try to leapfrog past them into something else. So the only time it's really not great is when you are like me and you just fail 4-inch charges. And that's true story. Over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I think I've lost 3 games. And all 3 of them, I failed at least 2 4-inch charges in the same charge phase with a reroll on one of them. So it was just one of those like string of just like bad dice rolls. It is what it is. Can't do anything about it, but just kind of laugh. The tournament I went to, I played a Sisters player, and I think I failed 1 4-inch charge. Fortunately, it was early enough in the game that I wasn't punished for it. So overall, I think Kommandos are a great utility unit that can put damage on other infantry models outside of Terminator class things. Stealth and Infiltrate are fantastic, and the no Overwatch is spectacular, and it does open the door for them to be just an amazing scoring unit. At 11 wounds in the unit, you can, charge into some bigger things like a Land Raider, for example, and at least tie them up for a turn. And the stealth does help overcome some of the silliness that some of these Marine armies and stuff get, where they're like, well, all my weapons are heavy if I just don't move. Well, that's fine. You're going to be -1 to hit me because you're engaged with your vehicles, and then you're going to be -1 to hit me because I'm stealth, and you're just going to go back to hitting on 4s like I wanted you to. And I only bring that up because that was another thing that came up at the tournament. So overall, like I said, I really have enjoyed them. They're kind of a finesse unit, which we don't have a lot of in the Ork Index. You don't have a lot of actual finesse there, but you can finesse these boys for sure. Art as nails once per game, 5-up invuln versus shooting, and you get a 5-up invuln on the wall, and it just helps them survive a little bit better. Overall, 3 out of 5 teeth. I think they're just a hair over pointed, but there's some great utility in the 11 wound package, and they can stand up to a lot of standard anti-infantry shooting. Big shout out to Kevin W., YouTube member. Thank you, sir. Hatchlings, the real Donnie G. You are the real OG, my friend. Jamie, $10 Phoenix. I appreciate that. And then the Immortals, Lord Wellingstone, Danny Boy, Captain Too Tall. Again, thanks a lot, guys. Your support is always appreciated. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you.